From the mid-19th century, organized feminist movements in America focused on activism that called for greater political, cultural, and economic freedom. These movements also called for equality for women in a society that treated women differently and relegated them to second-class citizenry. Yet, not all of these feminist movements pursued the same objective, included similar groups of women, or used the same approaches to activism and pushing for women's rights. Due to these generational differences, feminist movements were organized into waves that corresponded to different periods, with these waves also categorized into radical, liberal, and intersectional feminists. First wave feminists. Regarded as one of the pioneers of feminism, this first wave feminism centered on gaining rights for American women and was generally associated with the liberal movement that focused on gender equality in the public sphere. The movement effectively started in July 1848 with a crucial convention organized by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott at the Seneca Falls Convention in New York. During the convention, attendees signed the Declaration of Sentiments that acknowledged societal equality and also enacted resolutions that pushed for particular rights, for instance, the right to vote and participate in political processes. Despite this early women's rights movement closely linked to abolitionism, the passage of the 15th Constitutional Amendment 1870 infuriated some women leaders bitter about Black men being granted the right to vote before white women. The movement also downgraded Black women like Sojourner Truth and Ida B. Wells, who were important figures in first wave feminism. The movement's activities led to the ratification of the 19th Constitution in 1920, warranting white women the right to vote, with Black women excluded until the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Second wave feminists.
What do we want? Liberation! When do we want it? Now!
At the present time, it's a sort of watershed, I think. Women are apparently liberated in many ways, but in fact and in practice, they're not. They're still discriminated against in many professional fields, and often in very pernicious ways.
Second wave feminists were primarily active in the 1960s, 1980s, and centered on a range of issues like gender equality, reproductive rights, workplace discrimination, and sexual liberation. This wave of feminism emerged in the wake of the civil rights movement, and the antagonism against the Vietnam War was characterized by its radical approach as compared to first wave feminists who were majorly centered on suffrage. Second wave feminists fought for women's legal and social issues which were aimed to address discrimination across various aspects of American society. Some major figures who pioneered second wave feminism were Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, Bell Hooks, and Germaine Greer. During this era, three main types of feminism emerged: liberal or mainstream, radical, and cultural feminism. These types of feminism were focused on diverse goals, but with one primary focus of ensuring that women's rights were protected and all people were treated equally, irrespective of their gender. Similarly, like the first wave feminist movement, second wave feminism was criticized for focusing on privileged white women, forcing some Black women to form their feminist movements like the National Black Feminist Organization, NBFO. Radical feminists. Radical feminists are women embracing the philosophy that focuses on the patriarchal ancestries of inequality in society, especially the social domination of women by men. This movement views patriarchy as isolating societal rights and authority along the lines of gender, leading to the oppression of women and privileging men. This type of feminism also opposes existing political and social structures due to its ties to patriarchy. Hence, this movement is often skeptical of political factions within the political structures. They instead center more on cultural change, especially those that promote patriarchy and related hierarchical structures. Some of the major radical feminists include Tia Grace Atkinson, Susan Brown Miller, Phyllis Chester, Corinne Grad Coleman, Mary Daly, Andrea Dworkin, Shulamith Firestone, Germaine Greer, Carol Hannish, Jill Johnston, Catherine McKinnon, Kate Millett, Robin Morgan, Ellen Willis, and Monique Wittig. Some of the groups allied to the radical feminist groups were Red Stockings, New York Radical Women, NYRW, the Chicago Women's Liberation Union, CWLU, and Ann Arbor Feminist House. These groups were attributed to the rise of consciousness movements that talked more about the oppression of women and sexuality. Liberal feminists. Liberal feminists concentrate on gaining gender equality through legislative and political changes and demanding equal chances and rights for women within the present social structure. Among the prominent liberal feminists are Mary Wollstonecraft, John Stuart Mill, Betty Friedan, and Gloria Steinem. The movement centers on achieving women's suffrage, reproductive rights, equal pay, and elimination of gender-based discrimination. The main focal point of liberal feminists is the idea that freedom from discriminatory laws is the way forward towards gender equality. The enactment and passage of the Equal Rights Amendment era era was one of the major objectives of liberal feminists. From the proponent of women's suffrage who pushed for federal equality amendment to the feminist organizations of the 1960s and 1970s, like the National Organization for Women, each movement saw these amendments as imperative to create an equal and just society for all. Intersectional feminists. Intersectional feminists believe that gender oppression is intertwined with other forms of oppression like race, class, sexuality, and abilities, thus forming a cycle of oppression. This understanding, known as intersectionality, was developed in the late 1980s by Kimberly Crenshaw, a prominent scholar and civil rights activist. Crenshaw believed that Black women faced specific forms of discrimination that were not appropriately dealt with by either the white feminist movements or the civil rights movement, which mostly focused on the experiences of white women or Black men, respectively. In the US, intersectional feminists have been the driving force fighting for the rights and lives of vulnerable communities. For example, women of color, LGBTQ, and disabled individuals, among others, are victims of multiple oppressions. They have dealt with this issue by emphasizing the urgency of understanding and responding to the intersections of identity and power in feminist activism and justice movement. It is imperative to remember that feminism is not only a pursuit of equality for some, but rather a quest for equity and fairness for all. It's about eradicating systems of oppression and making this world a place where everyone is allowed to flourish and prosper regardless of their gender, race, sexuality, and disability status. What are your thoughts on this? Make sure to comment below. Don't forget to like and share.